Rage cannot stay buried in me. The primal scream is the only satisfying release.
You may not know this about me, but I am a massive fan of the Netflix Daredevil show. It holds a special place in my heart as I watched the pilot when it premiered on Netflix all the way back in April 2015, back when I was way too young to be watching anything with mature themes seen in Daredevil and the rest of the Defenders lineup of shows. It's in the upper echelon of live action superhero adaptations. I do not think it is overhyped in any way, shape, or form. It's probably the best project associated with the MCU. The worst season of Daredevil, the general consensus being that season 2 is the weakest out of the 3, is still better than most, if not all, of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. I've seen some people go, oh, but Loki and WandaVision are the best live action Marvel shows.
It's an interesting take, I like it. But yeah, no, sorry buddy. Way off on that one.
I mean, if we're only including shows produced by Marvel Studios, then sure. But if we're including all of Marvel, hell nah. Matt Murdock is without a doubt in my top 3 favorite MCU characters, which is saying a lot given the vast roster of well-written characters we've had the opportunity to connect to over the years. It was such a shame when Netflix canceled Daredevil and the rest of the Marvel Netflix shows in 2018. The showrunner pitched his plans for season 4 shortly before the cancellation announcement, which was set to include Typhoid Mary, who played a role in Iron Fist season 2, and the Owl, who was going to be Leland Owsley's son, since the original Owl from the comics, Leland Owsley, died in season 1 of Daredevil. Bullseye's return was being saved for season 5, and there were plans to slowly evolve Melvin Potter into Gladiator, just like in the comics. I remember back in 2022 when it was first announced by the trades that a new Daredevil series was in the works for the Disney Plus streaming service, and I remember my first instinct was pretty much, yeah, it's not gonna be as good. Now, I didn't think the show was going to be bad or mediocre, but if they weren't going to bring back the original showrunners and writers from the Netflix era, I just couldn't imagine it being up to par in terms of quality, but I still held out hope for a good product. However, there was a caveat to this new Daredevil show in development. While Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio were set to reprise their roles as Daredevil and Kingpin, Born Again was going to serve as a soft reboot of the Netflix show. They had no desire in continuing where that show left off and decided to ignore the canon that was established, which is why you see Kingpin out and about in Hawkeye despite being locked up in prison at the end of Daredevil season 3. There was a bunch of other nonsense that was going to be present in the original version of Born Again. Karen Page and Foggy Nelson were going to have no presence in the show. Matter of fact, Foggy was going to be killed off screen prior to the show's events. John Bernthal talked about how he was approached to reprise his role as the Punisher in the original version of the show, but he thought what they wrote for his character didn't make sense and that it wouldn't appeal to the fans. Apparently, the original showrunners made more of a legal procedural that lacked the action and violence of the Netflix series, and Matt didn't put on his Daredevil suit until the 4th episode. They shot about 6 episodes before production was halted thanks to the writer's strike, which was when Marvel looked back at the footage they had for Born Again and said,
Crap, mega crap.
So they got rid of the previous showrunners at the time and decided to rework the show to make the Netflix show canon again. They got the co-writer and executive producer of the Netflix Punisher series to serve as the new showrunner for Born Again, as well as acquiring Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead to direct a few episodes. To those unaware, they directed a good chunk of Loki season 2 and a couple of episodes of Moon Knight. Along with getting a new creative team, they also brought back Deborah Ann Wool and Eldon Henson to reprise their roles as Karen and Foggy. Punisher came back, Bullseye came back, the original actress for Vanessa was also set to return, which was significant because the character was initially going to be portrayed by a completely different actress. With all of this in mind, I kinda had my hopes up. Foggy and Karen are coming back, Punisher and Bullseye, from what we saw the set photos, seemed to be prominent throughout the season. They got the showrunner of the Punisher and the directors of Loki season 2. We might be eating good with this new show. Then I watched all 9 episodes of Daredevil Born Again on Disney Plus weekly as they were released, and my reaction throughout wasn't what I expected. Looking back on it, if they wanted to rework the show that initially had no ties to the Netflix show into something that was now a continuation of where the Netflix show left off, Marvel should have started from scratch instead of trying to Frankenstein what they already shot with the overhaul, because there's a lot left left to be desired due to the absence or minimal presence of major supporting characters from the previous series in Born Again. It's not as effective a continuation of the Netflix show as it could have been. I was under the assumption there would be more brand new episodes made from the decision to rework the show, instead of there only being 3 episodes out of the 9 that were directed by Benson and Moorhead. You can kind of tell while watching which episodes or scenes come from the original version of the show and which ones were part of the reworked version. Anything involving the Punisher and Bullseye are their attempts to try and connect back to the Netflix show, as well as incorporating Karen Foggy in episode 1. The first and last 2 episodes are the only ones that are completely brand new, which is why they're the only episodes that feature Bullseye and continue the plotline introduced in episode 1. While the rest of the show focuses more so on Muse, the side characters involved in Kingpin's rise to power, and the arc with White Tiger. From a visual standpoint, you'll see a couple of instances where the aspect ratio changes or the camera zooms in whenever Matt uses his super hearing. You don't see these levels of sauce anywhere else in the show. Clearly these scenes were Benson and Moorhead. With that, I also noticed some Madam Web levels of ADR in a few of the episodes, which I thought were hilarious.
Protect him from this freak. And we have nothing.
Says she actually escaped from Muse.
She's still alive.
She lost a lot of blood.
What the fuck are you doing? Huh?
Frank, stop!
Based on how the season played out, I question why Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios even bothered to make the Netflix show canon again if they weren't going to utilize most of the supporting cast in any meaningful way, just to sideline them in service of a brand new supporting cast that pales in comparison. The showrunner confirmed that episode 1 is set 7 years after Daredevil season 3, but the season fails to effectively bridge the gap between where we last saw these characters. For starters, Wilson Fisk's rise to power, culminating in his election as mayor of New York, pretty much undermines the narrative and thematic significance of Daredevil season 3. A big focus of season 3 was seeing Fisk slowly corrupt the FBI, putting the pieces together that eventually led to him getting released from custody. He started out by informing the FBI of the whereabouts and operations of other prominent criminal organizations he had been involved with over the years, becoming a key informant and enabling some of the most significant gang busts the FBI had seen in years. Special Agent Ray Nadeem took part in this, taking down criminal mobs like the Albanians. Fisk orchestrated for someone to stab him in prison to convince the FBI that it'd be best to relocate him to the presidential hotel in the city. This sparked protests and public outrage right outside the hotel where Fisk was confined in under house arrest, as Fisk is a very well-known and despised public figure in Hell's Kitchen. Later on, Nadeem would find out about Fisk's criminal actions that involved corrupting several FBI agents, including Ben Poindexter. Putting the pieces together with the help of Daredevil revealed Poindexter had dressed himself in a Daredevil costume to cause havoc. Once he tried to relay this information to his boss, Nadeem found out the hard way that she, along with multiple other FBI agents, were working for Fisk this whole time, largely due to Fisk threatening their families or loved ones.
Wilson Fisk is currently engaged in a criminal conspiracy and has manipulated the Bureau into becoming his unwitting accomplice. Fisk has corrupted an agent on his detail, Dex.
Special Agent Ben Poindexter?
I think Poindexter may have perpetrated the attack at the Bulletin. OPR needs to start an internal investigation into Fisk.
You bring this into my house.
Do you understand your situation?
You get this?
Yeah, boss.
I'm not your boss anymore. Wilson Fisk is. There's no way out, Ray. Fisk said you marked for more than a year. Why do you think your sister-in-law lost health coverage? Made you desperate for this job, and you did everything you could to get him this penthouse, get him everything he asked for. I used to have 2 children, Ray. They made it look like a hit and run. Do what Fisk tells you.
Later on, Nadeem agreed to testify against Fisk to reveal all of his wrongdoings and manipulation of the FBI, with Matt and Foggy agreeing to be his lawyers in the matter. After Nadeem gave his statement to a grand jury, Matt realized that Fisk got control of said grand jury. Realizing that Fisk would eventually send someone after him to kill him, Nadeem recorded a dying declaration shortly before his death, revealing Fisk's entire criminal operation, the specific names of the FBI agents he corrupted, and who aided and abetted him in Fisk's criminal conspiracy. This was enough evidence to put Wilson Fisk away for good after Nadeem's death, and that specific video was shown publicly to pretty much everyone who attended Wilson and Vanessa's wedding in the final episode. So all of Fisk's criminal activity and wrongdoing became very public information by that point. So I find it very hard to believe that I'm just supposed to accept the fact that Fisk is out of prison next time we see him in the MCU and would have enough public favor to run for mayor and win, despite the murders he committed or was involved in being exposed exposed in the New York Bulletin and in Ray Nadim's dying testimony. Before the show came out, the biggest defense I've seen for this is, oh, it's because of the blip. He gained control of the system and used the fact that half of the population disappeared to get an early release, or something along those lines. I feel like you're giving the MCU a bit too much credit here because again, none of the shows after Daredevil address how he would have utilized the blip to his advantage to get released. They do not allude to this at all. This is just an assumption people have. And even if the blip played a factor in his release, you know who else survived the blip? Freaking Daredevil. And if you remember at the end of season 3, Matt made a deal with Fisk saying, hey, you keep my identity as Daredevil a secret, you don't come after my friends or try anything to hurt people, and I don't use the incriminating evidence I have against your wife Vanessa that proves she ordered the hit on Special Agent Ray Nadim, thanks to the information I gathered from one of your accomplices.
You keep my secret. You won't harm Karen Page or Froggy Nelson or anyone else. If you do, I'll prove Vanessa ordered the murder of Agent Ray Nadim. She'll spend the rest of her life in a cell.
Fisk would obviously agree to this deal due to how much he cared for Vanessa's well-being. So you mean to tell me the years following that moment, Matt decided to not utilize the leverage he has against Fisk and Vanessa to make sure Fisk stays in his lane, and allowed Kingpin to regrow his criminal empire with the tracksuit mafia? Gee. Thanks, Matt. But let's play devil's advocate a bit here. Maybe Vanessa blipped away, thus making Matt's deal with Fisk null and void during that time frame. Okay then, why didn't he expose Vanessa afterwards once half the population came back? It doesn't matter how many years have passed, Matt and Foggy would still have access to the evidence that have Vanessa incarcerated, which he probably should have used to his advantage since it was revealed that it was Vanessa who hired the hit on Foggy and not Kingpin and Born Again. It's also baffling to me how many people were in support of Fisk becoming mayor of New York, whether it be people in the NYPD or regular New York citizens. Again, a lot of his criminal acts and accounts of murder were not withheld from the public. He was literally booed into oblivion when he was released from custody in season 3.
I know that most of you will find this difficult to accept. You've been manipulated into believing the news media's fake story.
I just voted for you. When Wilson Fisk set off those explosives in Hell's Kitchen, I lost my husband. I'm counting on you, Foggy.
I found it hilarious in episode 8 of Born Again's first season where Heather's like, Matt, what's your problem with Fisk? Why are you worried about him so much? Maybe it's because he tried to have Matt's friends killed, or more importantly, it being public information that Matt Murdock had a hand in putting Wilson Fisk away. He also accused Matt of being involved in his criminal organization and sent several FBI agents to raid his apartment. So it's fascinating Heather would even bother to ask such a question. Nelson and Murdock literally investigated Fisk's operations thanks to Marcy providing Foggy with a document from the law firm she worked at, Landman and Zack, which led to Daredevil finding Detective Hoffman, who was under Fisk's payroll, to testify against Fisk and reveal all of his wrongdoings. Nelson and Murdock represented Hoffman as his lawyers. Kingpin also hired several mercenaries to kill police officers and help him escape as he was being escorted in the season 1 finale after his arrest, which is a major reason as to why the NYPD hates Wilson Fisk. He is a notorious cop killer. This wasn't withheld information, this is public knowledge.
He's getting far more publicity than any cop killer deserves. His name deserves to be buried in the same hard earth where he put your fallen brothers.
Taking all of that into account, you'll never guess the explanation Born Again gives to justify Fisk being out of prison.
The whole FBI corruption scandal, Agent Nadim, all that. It's why my husband was acquitted.
What? How does that make any sense? Ray Nadim's dying declaration was admissible in court, as the law presumes that a person wouldn't lie if they believe they're about to die. Nadim literally went into detail on Fisk's wrongdoings in relation to the FBI and the murders he's committed or set in motion, and the specific FBI agents under Fisk's payroll were all arrested. The hell you mean he was acquitted? There was so much evidence stacked against him.
It's not going, you know what I'm saying? It ain't going, nah, it ain't gonna work.
Another thing that works really well about the Netflix show is how well written the supporting cast were throughout the 3 seasons. They weren't these one-dimensional, boring types that added little or nothing to the plot like some of the characters in Born Again. Kirsten and Cherry. Heather Glenn. So it was really frustrating to see how much of the supporting cast were either sidelined or completely ignored in Born Again. Where's Detective Mahoney, District Attorney Blake Tower, Ellison from the New York Bulletin? These guys would have a lot to say in regards to Wilson Fisk getting elected as mayor of New York. I remember watching Daredevil Born Again Season 1, Episode 1, Heaven's Half Hour, 8 minutes and 23 seconds into the episode, and they already got me tweaking. What they did to Foggy Bear was just an absolute travesty. Look, I get it. Comic book characters are going to go through different eras of their careers as crime fighters. Characters come and go, and like in the various comic runs Daredevil has had over the years, it makes sense on a surface level to have a new supporting cast for Born Again. The problem you run into is what was set up for Foggy Bear, Karen, and Matt at the end of Season 3. They re-established a new law firm dubbed Nelson, Murdoch, and Page, embarking a new chapter of their lives as they've reunited fully after all that's transpired. I've seen people go, well, it makes sense to kill off Foggy because there's not much more they could have done with his character. How would you know that? Given what we know about the original plans for Daredevil Seasons 4 and 5, it's pretty clear both Foggy and Karen would have continued to play integral parts of Matt's life.
I have a crazy idea.
Oh, he just wrote all of our names, didn't he?
I'm not a lawyer.
You're one hell of an investigator, though.
Yeah, and way more stable than Jessica Jones. To Nelson, Murdoch, and Page.
Imagine you watch Seasons 1 through 3 of Daredevil, jump right into Born Again with the setup of these characters, only to witness one of them getting shot in the chest and the other leaving for San Francisco as a result. Now I'm forced to watch my goats get replaced with a mundane supporting cast. Also, where is Marcy in all of this? You know, the woman Foggy wanted to marry in Season 3. It's weird that we don't see how Foggy's family reacts to his death, considering the time spent on them in Season 3. We have no idea where Marcy is, there's no mention of her. All we see is Foggy trying to hit it up with Kirsten McDuffie. I respect Foggy Bear for trying to get with the sister, alright, more power to him. But damn, no mention of Marcy's whereabouts is kinda crazy. After the 1-year time jump where we see Matt and Karen attend Bullseye's sentencing, we come to find out that Karen moved to San Francisco due to Matt not having talked to her for weeks after Foggy's death. Then at some point Matt tried to reconnect with Karen, but the damage had already been done. I have some issues with this. I find it hard to believe Karen would just abandon Matt and relocate to an entirely different city after all she and Matt have been through together, especially given what she learned about Matt's abandonment issues in Season 3. Karen had a conversation with Sister Maggie, during which she learned that Maggie hadn't been there to serve as a mother figure for Matt when he needed her most. The only time Karen tried to leave New York was when her life was in literal danger. Kingpin sent Bullseye to kill her after learning the truth behind James Wesley's murder. Even after all the crap Matt pulled in faking his death and trying to push Karen and Foggy away in pursuit of being Daredevil full time, she still stuck around by his side.
He learned the truth, that I'm his mother. I was a danger to Matthew when I gave him up. Nowadays they know a great deal about postpartum, but at the time I was convinced that I was betraying God. I abandoned my child. He found out on his own. I wanted to tell him.
You know?
Said she felt ashamed about what she did. Everyone you ever cared about left you.
Look, I was never gonna leave you up there, and I'm not leaving you now. Neither will Foggy, despite the fact that you've been a complete asshole to him.
In relation to the character dynamics built up in Season 3, where is Sister Maggie? Where is she, Kevin?
Where is she? I don't know! I would not let them tell me!
The complete absence of any mention of Sister Maggie's whereabouts has got to be one of the biggest fumbles of Born Again. Matt briefly mentions his mother in episode 5 during the bank robbery, but that's it. No update on her current well-being or presence in his life. You mean to tell me when Matt is at such a low point in his life due to the death of his best friend, he never goes to his biological mother that he rekindled his relationship with for emotional support, or that Maggie never offered the support and guidance Matt needs at this point in his life? How are you going to establish their newfound relationship at the end of Season 3 as a means of Maggie atoning for abandoning Matt as a child, only to not follow that up next time we see these characters? Matt literally says at the end that he would seek Maggie for guidance to have the conversations he used to have with Father Lantom after he was killed by Bullseye.
Did you know she was my mother?
I couldn't tell you, even when I wanted to.
Most times I looked to you for guidance. You chose to hide the one thing that could have changed everything for me. You couldn't find it in herself to walk 9 blocks or to comfort me when my father was murdered.
Maggie's a good person, Matthew. Flawed, but she dedicated her life to making amends.
Last time we spoke, I confronted Father Lantom. I was angry. I'd change that if I could. His last words were, "Forgive us.
Do you think that's possible?
I realized that if my life had turned out any differently, that I would never have become Daredevil. There are countless others that have lived. Maybe it is all part of God's plan. Father Lantham used to help me with that. Help me see the errors of my ways. I could use someone else to help me with that now.
I'm a nun, Matthew. Helping is what I was called to do.
To clarify, none of the actors in the new supporting cast did a bad job, nor do I think their characters are entirely poorly written. They're just nothing burgers who don't contribute much to the overall narrative. Name me 3 interesting things about Matt's new law partner, Kirsten McDuffie. Oh, are you having some trouble there? No, that's alright, that's alright. How about list some interesting things about Cherry instead?
Why y'all quiet? Why is everyone all of a sudden quiet? Huh?
At least with Kirsten, she can be understanding, but Cherry genuinely irritates me. Bro just exists to be completely useless. He finds out Matt is Daredevil in the first episode, shortly before he retires from being a vigilante for about a year. Some episodes later, he informs Matt about Muse. And when Hector Ayala's niece Angela gets kidnapped by Muse, Matt finally dons the Daredevil suit to save her. Matt tells Cherry that he thinks he might be able to get a better lead on Muse's whereabouts with Cherry's assistance. But Cherry outright refuses to help him because he's butthurt about Matt being Daredevil again. I can understand his frustration with Matt being a vigilante, but straight up refusing to help him stop a serial killer that you yourself informed him about, who already had about 60 victims, is straight up insanity. Matt did a better job at catching up to Muse than anyone in the force, but nah, instead of using his findings to your advantage, you want to scold Matt for being Daredevil.
Cops were dicking around getting nowhere. I found Muse in one night. 60 dead. Would have been one more if Daredevil hadn't shown up.
If you want to blow up your life again, you go ahead. You're on your own.
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa! I will slap the fuck out this nigga, bro. What's wrong with this nigga? He's so lame.
I think we can all agree that Cherry's character should have 100% been Detective Mahoney. You know, the one guy in the force we saw have an actual working relationship with Matt Murdock and Daredevil throughout the Netflix show. Man, let me tell you something about my nigga Brett Mahoney.
Let me tell you something. The hell with this, Shane. Let me tell you something else, man. Let me tell you something, man.
Mahoney has consistently been shown to be one of the few good cops the NYPD has to offer, especially in the first season when it was shown that Fisk had bribed roughly half of the police department. In the first episode of the original show, we're shown that he has a working relationship with Matt and Foggy. He was involved in the arrest of Wilson Fisk in both season 1 and season 3, as well as growing his working relationship with Daredevil, who he cooperated with to take down Wilson Fisk. In layman's terms, he was practically Daredevil's own Commissioner Gordon. The fact that there's no mention of his whereabouts after Foggy's death, and especially after Fisk became mayor, considering he was heavily involved in taking down Fisk both times, is insane to me. Do you know how much harder the first episode of Born Again would have hit if it was Detective Mahoney who discovered Matt Murdock was Daredevil after Foggy's death? Someone who had built a dynamic with both sides of Matt, only to realize they were the same person right after losing Foggy, someone he also knew over the years. The other supporting characters also offer nothing of intrigue, like BB Urich and her little segments featuring New Yorkers that were sprinkled into most episodes. Listen man, I don't care how fine she is.
What?
The writers have offered me nothing that would make me care for her. All we really know is that she's the niece of Ben Urich and is following in her uncle's footsteps, but this time there's no inner conflict shown with BB, unlike with Ben Urich's wife who suffered from a health condition. All she's done this entire season was write a hit piece on Fisk, which didn't do that much damage in the long run. Instead of wasting time on showing the thoughts of random New Yorkers of the show's events, you could use that time to actually give BB any sort of interesting characterization. There's no character development, there's no depth. And don't even get me started on Heather Glenn, by far the most boring, generic love interest Matt Murdock has had in the MCU. Just like Cherry and Kirsten, I don't think she's badly written. There are no issues with the acting, there's just nothing there. I'm not emotionally invested in this character. For some reason, she has this huge hate boner for vigilantes like Daredevil, going as far as comparing people like him to a literal serial killer who had around 60 victims. Sure, let's just completely ignore the fact that Daredevil helped put Wilson Fisk away twice and saved countless lives in Hell's Kitchen.
Daredevil. That's what they're calling him now. The man in the mask.
Muse tried to kill you, Daredevil saved you.
I saved me.
I beg your finest pardon? Last time I checked, you were getting choked to death before Daredevil swooped in to save the day. If Muse would have killed Heather right then and there, I would have felt nothing. I feel like the end of Muse's storyline was a bit anticlimactic because there wasn't proper build-up to him over the course of the episodes leading up to episode 7. Some of the scenes with Muse in the 7th episode would have been more impactful had we gotten more screen time with him via the therapy sessions between Heather and Muse, because we see an unmasked Muse as early as episode 2 where he asks for Heather's help, but we don't see them interact again until 5 episodes later where he dies that same episode. Born Again has these plot threads that I feel should have been focused on more throughout the course of the season, specifically pertaining to the corrupt cops that idolize the Punisher. I feel like you could have done more with that storyline and utilized more of Frank Castle having to deal with these bozos, instead of him ignoring their antics until he finally decides to take action in the season finale. Had to endure 9 episodes of inconsistent quality to watch Punisher start murking niggas. They had the opportunity to follow up on that after the death of White Tiger in episode 3, but then it sort of pivots to the stuff with Muse and the underdeveloped romance between Heather and Matt. That being said, there is some stuff you're here to see sprinkled in there, like Matt and Frank's interaction in episode 4. It's always good to see Jon Bernthal's portrayal of the Punisher, the parallels between Kingpin and Daredevil near the end of episode 6 where Daredevil fights Muse and Kingpin beats the living breaks off Adam, were cool to see. In terms of the general premise of Born Again, where a significant portion focuses on Matt refusing to return to his Daredevil persona after the death of a loved one, didn't interest me as much because we've been down this road before. If you remember, during the season 2 finale of the original show, Elektra Natchios was killed by the Hand and died right in front of Matt's eyes, which hurt him deeply since Elektra was his first love interest. They met all the way back when he was studying at Columbia. Next time we see him in the Defenders show, we come to find out he actually stopped being Daredevil and spent the majority of his time doing pro bono work after Nelson and Murdoch shut down at the end of season 2.
Do you miss it? The suit, the mask?
Feels like a chapter of my life that's closed.
And I really think that Daredevil may have made the city a safer place.
But right now the city's better off without him.
He would eventually come to his senses and team up with the other Defenders to stop the Hand. Season 3 did the opposite, where after he was presumed dead, he decided to give up his identity as Matt Murdock and operate as Daredevil full time. The 3rd season really spent a lot of time on Matt questioning his religious faith and overall purpose.
My delusion was thinking God had anything to do with it. I don't get to choose who I am. I'm Daredevil. Not even God can stop that now.
Thank God for you.
He didn't help you. I did.
So yeah, Daredevil Born Again is pretty much exactly on par with the Netflix show like people have been saying, only differences being that the original show had better pacing, better dialogue, better written side characters, shot composition, use of color grading, better lighting and scenes that take place at night, fight choreography, emotional depth, soundtrack, overall plot. But nah, it's pretty much on the same tier. Look, I'm not saying Born Again is a bad show. There are aspects to it that I like, and if they had stuck their ground with a soft reboot, most of the problems I have with the show in terms of its continuity would be completely null and void. I just think if you're gonna go out of your way to make it tie into the Netflix show that is so beloved by many, you gotta do the work to incorporate the characters that elevate Daredevil's character and follow through with the established canon. You can't just nullify grand character arcs with little to no explanation on the current status quo, or barely mention those integral characters, especially when you focus on a significantly less interesting and compelling supporting cast that makes you miss the old cast, which is a pretty glaring issue. If they really wanted to make the Netflix show canon, they should have started from scratch to have Born Again tie in better. But who knows, maybe they'll do a better job in season 2 since the current creative team doesn't have to work around pre-established footage of a version of the show that had a completely different canon. So here's to hoping the 2nd season will be much better, if I care enough to watch it by then.